Hello, everybody. Good to be here in Vienna. As Enmol said, my name is Ben Magro, and I'm a product manager at Atlassian, and I look after the DC Apps program. Today, I'm going to walk you through some updates and changes to the program that we have implemented. We'll start by touching on some of the results of the program to date. We'll talk a little bit about the license enforcement transition that happened on the 3rd of September this year and what it means for app developers. We'll touch on some of the updates and changes we're making to the submission process, and then we'll leave a good whack of time at the end for any questions that you guys might have on the program or anything related to it. So let's first start by kicking in to some of the results. So really, the DC program sets out to do two things. The first is we really would like to deliver an enterprise-grade ecosystem for our customers' mission-critical deployments. So, we have some of the largest customers in the world, people going to the moon or Mars, relying on our DC infrastructure on a day-to-day basis. And when it goes down, it means their people can't work. The second real kind of goal of the DC Apps program is to provide a way for vendors to differentiate their DC products so they can kind of build their own features and functionality into their DC products and have it stand out as a separate offering or SKU within the program itself. This clicker is not working. So in just 12 months, I think we launched the DC Apps program here at Atlas Camp 12 months ago. We're excited to see over 620 DC-approved apps now listed in the marketplace. Actually, I checked this today. We have 657 now. This slide is out of date, just in between me creating it and coming to Vienna to give this talk. So that's pretty cool. This represents around 93% of the top apps used by our server customers today. So when we look at the most popular, most used apps by our server customers, the top 100, 93% of them have been DC approved. So we're seeing great adoption by the community itself. We're also excited to see some results rolling in around the reliability of data center approved apps. Currently, the numbers as of today, when we look at support cases from this year, suggests that DC approved apps are 3 times less likely to result in a critical support issue. So you're 3 times less likely to have an L1, L2, or a mission-critical outage or performance issue when you're running a DC-approved app. So we're super excited to see these results flowing in. We're also starting to see a large number of customers making the transition from using a server version of the app to a DC version of the app. And what are the benefits? When we're kind of seeing these customers move from server to DC, this question starts coming up. What are the benefits of moving to a DC-approved version of the app? Customers are having to go out and buy a new license. They're asking this question. Today, we've launched online on WAC what we're calling the DC Apps OnePager. It covers all of the benefits of the program today in a simple one-pager. It's available at this link, bit.ly/DC-apps-1. And as you can see, it gives the information of some of the results we've seen in the program to date. We're asking you to download it, provide it to your customer-facing teams so that they can share the results of the program with your customers today. We think your teams will find this one-pager particularly useful around this license transition time that I've been speaking about. So let's talk about license transition and kind of what it is. This date was built into the program on its announcement, as I said here at Atlas Camp 12 months ago. And this happened a few days ago, around the 3rd of September 2019. So what does it mean for you? So when I say license enforcement, really what that means is customers that are renewing their app license for DC hosts are required to purchase a DC license if the license start date is after the 3rd of September 2019. So basically what this distills down into is that we want DC customers running DC apps when they renew post the 3rd of September, which was a few days ago, if one is available. If one is not available, they're able to keep running that server version. And so all the renewals that are going out for your DC customers, those renewals will need to be for the DC version of the app. One of the changes when we introduced this program is we now actually align the DC app user tiers, so this is quite handy. Previously, the server user tiers and the DC user tiers used to be different, and so now when your vendors, when your customers are renewing, they can renew using the kind of matching tier for the license that they're using, which is pretty cool. Really, really detailed notes on this transition have been posted on the developer community back in May, and I created this bit.ly link for you if you want to go and get a lot more details of the implementation, how UPM actually treats licenses that are prior to the 3rd of September and post 3rd of September. We even have some example licenses there for you to test on your apps, etc. Available at this bit.ly link, DC app license enforcement, or Apple. So now that this license transition date has passed, this 3rd of September date I mentioned, there's some certain things to keep in mind when you're getting DC app approval in the future. The first is you need to think about notifying your customers. So the program, what we're suggesting or what we're requiring of vendors now is that you need to provide customers with 3 months notice if you intend to go through the DC app approval process. So you need to let them know, like, hey, we're going on this journey, we're going to get DC approval if you have a server app existing in the marketplace today. An easy way to do this is in the release notes, and so we suggest on just any releases that you're putting out, just having a note like, in the future, we are planning to release a DC version of this app. Now, the reason we're suggesting you do this is for the customer experience. This is actually quite a manual transition, unfortunately. And what this means is if a customer upgrades and they have a server app and they upgrade to a DC app and they're running a server license, that app will actually stop working for them because they don't have a valid license. And so this is why we suggest letting your customers know, like, hey, this is coming, and when you update to the DC approved version, you'll need to transition over to another license. And I'll talk you through. Not having much luck with this clicker. So I'll talk you through what happens when this license enforcement kicks in and what happens if an app stops working. Your customer says to you, hey, I can no longer use the app. What options do I have? So really, there are 3 options that a customer can take. The first is they can roll back. So server licenses are sold on a perpetual basis. If they roll back to that previous version, which is not a DC-approved app, that app will continue to function fine in perpetuity. That is the nature of a server perpetual license. And so they can roll back to that previous build, which wasn't DC-approved. The second option is generate an eval license. This is a good way just to get out of the trouble of, hey, this app is no longer working because I clicked the update button. Generate an evaluation license. And then lastly, they can contact Atlassian and purchase a DC license, which will be a valid license now on that DC-approved app. So, as I said, this is not the most ideal of processes. Really, a focus for us has been to make sure that we don't F the customer with the refund policy because this process is so manual and because we can't automatically transition a customer over to the new license. And so what we've introduced is a blanket pro rata approval. And so what this means is any customer that's forced to migrate to a DC approved app because one comes out or they upgrade their host system or something changes, they can contact us and we'll provide them a pro rata refund for that. So any unused credit, conditional on the purchase of a DC app. We think this is in the vendor's best interest because DC apps in general have a higher total cost of ownership. And so the vendor community is reasonably incentivized to try and help as many customers as possible migrate over to this DC approved version of the app. And so we've made it a lot easier. We make sure that we're not effing the customer by them having 6 months of license that is just useless and cannot be used. We'll actually provide some credit back to them for the purchase of the DC-approved app. So like I said, there's a much deeper dive into this on the vendor community in the DC Apps program section. Take a look and pop any questions that you might have about this on there. Let's dive into some of the changes and updates that we're making to the program. One of the things that we made clear at the launch of the DC Apps program was that we intended to raise the quality bar for the DC Apps program over time. We've tried to be thoughtful about how we approach these changes, and we welcome your feedback here today. So today I'm officially announcing 4 changes to the DC Apps program, and I'm going to talk you through each of these changes one by one. The first of these changes is today we would like to unveil the Data Center App Performance Toolkit. So this is a purpose-built app performance framework targeted specifically at DC vendors and the DC Apps program. Whilst this is a new tool, a new app performance framework, it harvests a lot of work from our internal performance testing systems and JPT, which we use both internally and has been open source. But like I said, it's specifically built for the DC app vendor purpose. The toolkit will be released today for use in beta with the Jira 8.0 branch, which was the last platform release of Jira, with Confluence and Bitbucket support set to be delivered in the coming months. And so what you'll see is, by GA of this product, you'll see us supporting the latest enterprise release and the latest platform release for every product. And so, we've announced the Jira Enterprise 8.5 release coming in the future. And so when that comes out, we'll have support for that as well. So when developing the performance toolkit, we had 4 major goals in mind. The first is that we wanted it to be easy, quick to set up, and we wanted to provide detailed walkthroughs that you could use to step-by-step go through the performance testing process. Secondly, we wanted the performance toolkit to ship with a data set. When we spoke to a lot of vendors were saying it was taking them weeks to create an actual enterprise-scale data set. And so we ship with a 1 million issue, 2 million attachment, 600 custom field, enterprise-scale data set, and we will keep that up to date with each of the versions that we support for this toolkit. Thirdly, we wanted it to be decoupled. We didn't want it to be tied to any particular deployment option or data set. So you don't have to use the data set we ship with, though we think it's the best enterprise data set that's out there publicly. And as I said, it's not tied to a deployment mechanism, so you should be able to point it at a local instance. And lastly, it's extensible. It's built to be customized to test your individual apps. So what is it not? What is it? Like, what are our asks of you? Really, this is not carved in stone. It's in beta for a reason. We're seeking your feedback on the approaches that we've outlined in this performance framework. And so, yeah, feel free to let us know if you disagree with our approaches or if you have suggestions or improvements. It's not mandatory today. So if you're going through the DC app approval process, you aren't required to use this. But it is recommended. We think vendors should be spending time fixing performance regressions, not maintaining a performance toolkit. Thirdly, it's not built for Atlassian's app. It's not built really for us to test our own applications. It's built for you guys to test your application. So test out its extensibility features and functions and let us know how they work for you or if there's gaps in that. And like I said, raise improvements. This isn't abandonware. We have a team of engineers that are working on keeping this up to date, and so we're here to listen. You can get the tool today at this link, this bit.ly.com/DCAPTK. This will take you over to a detailed walkthrough on how to use the tool. And this walkthrough is like step-by-step script kiddie kind of stuff. Like, it's so easy that even I've been able to go through it and like deploy an instance and start performance testing on it. And so really we wanted to kind of ship with the guidance. There's also a Slack group, the Atlassian Performance Tooling Slack group. It's the old JPT group, and so we'll use that for both ongoing JPT conversations and any questions that you might have around the performance toolkit, and our developers will be hanging out in there. And also this bit.ly link dcapt_issue takes us to the ecosystem project where you can raise suggestions, bugs, any kind of problems with the toolkit. For more detailed, like kind of a one-on-one on using this performance framework, I'd highly recommend you attend Alex and I's talk tomorrow at 3:30 p.m., I believe, where it'll be a technical deep dive into actually running that performance toolkit. We'll take you through it step by step. The rest of the changes that are in effect today are related to the app approval process. These changes are live now for all new submissions, and over the coming months we'll be looping back with each of the different vendors on their DC help ticket to see where they stand in relation to these changes. For any changes, we're asking or we're giving vendors 14 days to respond just with the status of where do they sit in relation to these checks. Do you support it? Do you not support it? And then we're giving vendors 6 months to comply with any of these new requirements. We think this strikes the right balance between what the vendors need and what the customers need to kind of bring these apps up to compliance, so all apps kind of have the same quality bar. So let's get into what these changes are. The second change that I'm going to talk through today is what we're calling the Jira Lucene Index Timing Test. So this graph here was generated by our DC Next Generation team. This team is responsible for looking at how our DC products scale to, maybe 1 billion users, and how does it go vertically, horizontally, et cetera. And what they discovered was as issue index creation time increases, so the time it takes to create the issue, the max throughput of this indexing operation decreases. And so what it means is badly written plugins can have a significant impact on the performance of indexing over time, and they can really, really drive down. We've heard some customers on enterprise scale taking, a week, 2 weeks, Andrew, to index their issues, and so this is kind of crazy. And so now we want to actually start looking at how vendors impact the index. And so vendors will now be required to submit their index times for a 1 million issue data set. So I'll talk you through that in a little bit more detail. Okay, first off, this index, Lucene Index Issue Test, obviously it's just for Jira. It is supported by the Performance Toolkit, right? So if you're following this user guide that we put out, it takes, I think, 40 minutes to run an index, a foreground index, with no plugin installed, right? So once you put your plugin installed through the process, you already have the database set up because you're doing your performance testing. You kind of get this out of the box for free. It's kind of 40 minutes, hopefully less. Well, probably not less, but hopefully not significantly more than 40 minutes of compute time for you to actually run this test. We want you to install your plugin, run a foreground index, and see how long does it take to complete a full index when your plugin is installed. Like I said, it takes 40 minutes with the toolkit, and then provide a screenshot of on the DC help ticket of the index acknowledgement screen of how long did it take to complete this operation. This is like a human back and forth, if it makes sense to take a significant time or a percentage time increase on the index, we'll talk it through. So we haven't set out any black and white yes and no, but we do want to understand how the Lucene index time is affected by the operation of your plugin. The third change I'm going to run you through today is around Confluence Read-Only Mode, or the Confluence Read-Only Mode test. So one change for Jira, one change for Confluence. So Confluence Read-Only Mode was released in June of this year. It allows customers that are upgrading their instance, allows customers to put their instance that's being upgraded into a read-only mode, allowing the bulk of users to continue using the tool with kind of a read-only mode, no write available. Therefore, as of today, to be listed as a DC-approved app in Confluence, vendors will need to ensure that apps do not write data to Confluence when it is in read-only mode. And so this is really because apps can lead to data loss. If it's in read-only mode and the app is writing to the DB, it's not going to work. And so to be a DC-approved app, you must support read-only mode. There's really two things you need to figure out. One is when the system's in read-only mode, how do you affect your UI? How does it show? Do you gray out the buttons, etc.? And two, you need to prevent any execution of write during this time. This is all detailed. If you Google, there's a developer doc on it, like how do I make my Confluence app support read-only mode? It goes into this in a lot more detail, but as I said, as of today, new apps will need to support read-only mode to be DC approved. The last change I want to talk you through is what we're calling the third-party communication check. So enterprise customers need transparency into their data risk. It comes up quite often, particularly when we're talking to customers in the finance sector. Similar problems in the cloud that you would have heard people talk about today. Mostly our enterprise customers are just blocking or firewalling a lot of this off, but some customers want to know why. Like what is actually happening with the plugin? Where is my data going if I install this plugin? And so now, as part of the architectural review, vendors will now be required to answer the following questions in relation to their apps. So first off, we want to know, does your app send data out from the host instance itself? Secondly, we want to understand who manages, who runs that instance you're sending out data to. Does your legal entity own that server, or are you sending it off to a separate third party? And then lastly, does the data you send off the system contain any PII? Again, we tend to think of this program as like a human program. We haven't set out like strict yes or no's around this stuff. Certain apps that might send out, like an SSO app that sends out an email address, like it makes sense. Email addresses are considered PII. It makes sense in that case, but we want to understand if your apps are sending out data, why are they sending out data, and what's the kind of risk to the user. Again, we hope these checks make sense to you as vendors. We think that we've struck the balance between customer needs and vendor flexibility. We now have about 10 or 15 minutes for any questions around the DC app program or any of these changes for today.